You ever have a moment when everything just stops? Like the air gets knocked out of your lungs and suddenly nothing feels real anymore? Like the ground beneath you isn't solid and you're floating in some strange, inescapable limbo. I had one of those moments not long ago, and it all started with a conversation. A simple, private conversation that, at first, felt harmless. But by the time it was over, I wasn't the same person anymore. It's strange how life works. You spend years building something: trust, love, a home, thinking it's solid, thinking it'll last. You ignore the cracks. You tell yourself love is just hard sometimes. But then, one day, someone says something, and it's like a match hitting gasoline. A tiny flicker, and then boom. Everything you thought you knew? Up in flames. And the worst part? I never saw it coming. I need to tell you this story. Because maybe you've been here too. Maybe you've felt invisible in your own home. Maybe you've questioned your own worth. Maybe you've been so starved for affection, for attention, that when someone finally sees you, truly sees you, it feels like oxygen after drowning for years. That's what he did. My husband's boss. He saw me. And what he told me in private. It changed everything. I should have walked away. I should have never let it go as far as it did. But when you're lost, when you're aching for something you can't even name, sometimes you make choices that don't feel like choices at all. If you've ever had a moment that changed everything, tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because trust me, this story is just the beginning. It wasn't always like this. We used to be in love. We used to talk for hours, laugh at things no one else would understand, fall asleep tangled in each other like we were afraid to let go. But lately, it feels like I could vanish into thin air and he wouldn't even notice. I remember the first time I felt it, really felt it. The shift. The moment I knew something had changed between us. It was a Wednesday night. I had made his favorite dinner, set the table with the good plates, even lit a candle, just hoping it would remind him of us, of what we used to be. But when he walked through the door, he barely looked at me, barely said a word, just muttered something about a long day at work and sat down in front of his laptop. I waited for him to ask about my day, waited for him to look up, but he never did. That's how it started. The slow, quiet unraveling. At first, I told myself it was just stress, that he was tired, that things would go back to normal soon. But soon never came. The distance between us grew wider, the silence heavier. And before I knew it, we weren't even fighting anymore. Fighting would have meant there was still something to fight for. But there was nothing. Just nothing. I tried. God, I tried. I dressed up. I planned date nights. I asked him, begged him, to just talk to me. And every time, he'd give me the same tired response. Not now. I'm busy. We'll talk later. But later never came. Nights turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And suddenly, I was alone in a marriage with a man who wasn't really there. I didn't even recognize our home anymore. It used to be filled with laughter, with warmth. Now, it was cold, empty, silent. Dinners were just me picking at my food while he scrolled through emails. Mornings were a quick kiss on the cheek, out of habit, not love. And nights? Nights were the worst. I would lay next to him, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I ever had in my entire life. And that's when he started talking about his boss. Always his boss. How brilliant he was. How much respect he commanded. How he had built the company from the ground up. At first, I barely listened. But the more he talked, the more curious I became. Who was this man my husband admired so much? What kind of person had him coming home late, glued to his phone, acting like I no longer existed? And then, one day, I met him. It was at a company event. Some fancy dinner at an upscale restaurant, the kind of place where the wine glasses are so thin you're afraid to hold them too tight. My husband had barely spoken to me all night, too busy shaking hands and flashing his best corporate smile. I was just there, an accessory, the wife he had to bring but didn't care to acknowledge. I felt small, invisible, until I heard a voice behind me. You must be his wife. I turned, and that's when I saw him for the first time. He wasn't what I expected. He wasn't young or flashy. He wasn't loud or arrogant. He was older, distinguished, the kind of man who didn't have to demand attention. He just had it. Salt and pepper hair, a sharp, knowing gaze, a quiet confidence that made you want to listen when he spoke. And when he looked at me, really looked at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. He smiled, extended his hand. "I've heard a lot about you," he said. I forced a polite smile, but deep down, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly had he heard. I should have known, right then and there, that this was the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had tried to get out of it, said I had a headache, that I wasn't feeling well. But my husband barely looked up from his phone when he told me it was important. His boss would be there. I had to come. So I did. I sat at that table, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women in sparkling dresses, feeling like I had wandered into someone else's life. Conversations hummed around me, laughter bubbled over glasses of expensive wine, but I wasn't part of it. I was just there. My husband sat beside me, but it was like I didn't exist. He was too busy leaning forward, nodding eagerly, hanging onto every word his boss said. I watched him. Watched the way his eyes lit up, the way he laughed at the right moments, the way he was so present for this man, in a way he hadn't been for me in years. I shifted in my seat, cleared my throat, tried to join the conversation. But no one noticed. Not even him. And then, just as I was about to reach for my drink, a voice spoke beside me. Big nights like these can feel a little lonely, can't they? I turned, and there he was. My husband's boss. Standing just close enough that his words felt like they were meant for me and me alone. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because he was right. It was lonely. And the fact that he had noticed, really noticed, felt like something dangerous. He smiled, easy and knowing, as if he had already read every thought in my head. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward the empty seat beside me. I hesitated. But before I could answer, he had already taken it. For the first time that night, I wasn't invisible. We talked. At first, it was just small talk, the usual pleasantries, the surface-level niceties. But then, somewhere between sips of wine and stolen glances, the conversation shifted. He asked about me. Not about my husband. Not about the company. Me. "Tell me something," he said, swirling the liquid in his glass. "What's it like being married to a man who doesn't seem to realize what he has?" The question caught me off guard. My breath hitched. My fingers tightened around my napkin. Because no one had ever said it out loud before. Not even me. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "I don't know what you mean." He just smiled. "You're a remarkable woman. And I don't think your husband realizes how lucky he is." Something inside me twisted. A part of me wanted to brush it off, to call it harmless flattery. But another part, the part that had been aching for so long, clung to those words like they were air. Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, he leaned in just slightly, his voice lowering, his eyes locking onto mine. And then, he said something else. Something that sent a chill down my spine. His words lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. "You're a remarkable woman. I don't think your husband realizes how lucky he is." At first, I told myself it was just a polite compliment, something people say to be kind, to fill the silence. But the way he said it, the way his eyes held mine, steady and deliberate, it didn't feel casual. It felt like something else. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to name. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, I replayed it over and over. The way he had leaned in, the way his voice had softened just slightly, just enough to make my heart stumble. Was I overthinking it? Was I imagining the weight behind those words? Or had he seen it, the loneliness, the quiet ache I carried around like a secret? I turned to look at my husband. He was already asleep, his back to me, breathing slow and steady, just like every other night. I stared at him, waiting, hoping for something to rise inside me. Love, desire, even resentment. But all I felt was emptiness. I tried to push the thought away. It was just a conversation. Nothing more. But then, the little things started happening. At first, they were easy to ignore. A glance held a second too long. A touch, light, fleeting on the small of my back as he passed by. The way he always seemed to know where I was in a crowded room, his gaze finding mine before anyone else's. And the way he spoke to me. It wasn't just about work or small talk. He asked questions no one else did. He listened in a way that made me feel like I mattered. Like I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's afterthought. And maybe that's what made it so dangerous. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I told myself it was harmless. That he was just being kind. But deep down, I knew better. And yet, I didn't pull away. I didn't stop it. Because the truth was, I didn't want to. I started noticing the way my heart picked up when I saw his name on my phone. The way I searched for him in a room without even realizing it. The way a simple good morning from him felt warmer than my husband's touch. I hated myself for it. I hated the way it made me feel. Like I was betraying something, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. But was it wrong? To want to be noticed? To crave something that had been missing for so long? I thought I could keep it under control. Keep it in my head, where it couldn't hurt anyone. But then, one afternoon, just as I was gathering my things to leave the office, my phone buzzed. A message. From him. Lunch tomorrow? Just us. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. That's when I knew. This wasn't nothing. This was something. And I had no idea if I wanted to stop it. I told myself it was just lunch. Just two people sharing a meal. Nothing more. Nothing less. But as I sat across from him at that small, candlelit table, I knew I was lying to myself. The restaurant was quiet, intimate. The kind of place where voices were hushed, where everything moved just a little slower, like the world outside didn't exist. It wasn't a place you came to for a quick bite. It was a place for conversations that meant something. And I had a feeling that whatever was about to happen between us, it would mean something. He ordered for me. Not in an overbearing way, but in a way that felt natural, effortless, like he already knew what I'd like. Trust me, he had said with a smile, and for some reason, I did. At first, we talked about nothing. Work, the food, the weather. But there was something underneath it, something unspoken woven between every glance, every quiet pause. I could feel it, and I knew he could too. Then, somewhere between the first course and the second, he leaned in just slightly and said, "Tell me the truth. When was the last time you felt truly happy?" The question hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I looked away, forcing a small laugh. "That's a dangerous question," I said, reaching for my glass. But he didn't smile. He didn't let me brush it off. He just waited. And for the first time in a long time, someone was waiting for my answer. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the stem of my wine glass. "I used to be happy," I admitted, before life got in the way. He nodded, as if he understood something I hadn't even said out loud yet. And then, he spoke. "Your husband doesn't see you, does he?" My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. Because there it was. The thing I had never dared to say. The truth I had been running from. I looked down at my plate, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. "It's not that simple," I murmured. But he didn't let me go that easily. "It is," he said softly. "You deserve better than being ignored." I should have walked away then. I should have ended it. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, someone was looking at me like I mattered. Like I wasn't just an afterthought. And I didn't want to let that go. The conversation shifted after that, but something between us had changed. The air felt heavier, charged with something I wasn't sure I wanted to name. He told me about his own marriage, about the cracks beneath the surface, about the things no one else saw. And I listened, hanging on to every word, because it felt like he was giving me permission to feel what I already did. At some point, his hand brushed against mine. A small touch, barely there. But my entire body reacted to it. A slow, creeping warmth spread through me, settling in places I hadn't felt in years. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But then I looked up, and his eyes told me I wasn't. The tension between us built with every passing second, thick and undeniable. It wasn't just sympathy. It wasn't just kindness. It was something more. And we both knew it. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice low, deliberate. "Let me take you somewhere," he said. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew what he meant. I knew what he was asking. For a moment, I considered it. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like, to be wanted, to be touched, to feel something real again. I should have walked away, but I didn't. And then, he made me an offer that left me breathless. His words hung in the air between us. "Let me take you somewhere." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for the longest moment of my life, I didn't know what to say. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the rush of blood through my veins. My hands, resting on the table, felt too still, too cold. I wanted to move, to breathe, to say something, anything, but I was trapped in the weight of this moment. Because I knew that if I said yes, there would be no turning back. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had seen me when I had felt invisible. The man who had listened when my own husband barely acknowledged me. The man who made me feel like something more than a shadow in my own life. But was that all he was? Just someone who happened to notice? Or was this something deeper? Was I just lonely, or was I falling for him? A part of me didn't care. A part of me wanted to forget about everything else, about right and wrong, about consequences, about the man waiting for me at home who never really waited for me at all. A part of me wanted to stand up, take his hand, and disappear into the unknown. But then, my phone rang. I jolted, blinking as if I had been pulled from a trance. My husband's name lit up the screen. My throat went dry. He never called during the day. Never called unless it was important. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, pretending I hadn't seen it. But something made me answer. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For the first time in what felt like forever, he sounded soft. Not rushed, not distracted. Just soft. "I was just thinking about you," he said. "I know we haven't been great lately. I miss you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Because they were the words I had been aching to hear for years. Words I thought he had forgotten how to say. And he had chosen this moment, this exact moment, to say them. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I could feel my boss's eyes on me, waiting, watching. I could still feel the heat of his touch from earlier, still hear the unspoken promise in his voice. But suddenly, it wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't about what he made me feel. It was about me. About what I was willing to do. About what kind of person I was about to become. And in that moment, I saw the truth. I wasn't invisible. I was just lost. I had spent so long searching for something, affection, attention, validation, that I had convinced myself I needed someone else to give it to me. That I needed a man to notice me in order to feel seen. But that wasn't true, was it? The problem had never just been my husband. It had been me. The part of me that had stopped trying, that had stopped fighting for what I wanted. The part of me that had given up long before my husband ever had. I took a deep breath and turned to my boss. He was still watching me, waiting for my answer. And for the first time since this all started, I finally knew what it was. "I have to go," I said. And then I stood up. He didn't stop me. He didn't call my name. Didn't try to convince me to stay. He just nodded, a small, knowing smile on his lips. Like he already knew what I was going to choose. Like he had been testing me this whole time, waiting to see how far I would go. I turned, walked out of the restaurant, and stepped into the cold air. The sky had darkened while we were inside, heavy clouds rolling in, the first drops of rain splattering against the pavement. It felt fitting somehow. Like the world was washing something away. I pressed my phone to my ear. "I miss you too," I whispered. And then I went home. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. I set my bag down carefully, listening for any sign of him. A chair scraping. The sound of footsteps. Anything. But there was nothing. I stood there for a moment, my body still buzzing with everything that had just happened. My heart was still racing, my breath uneven. I had walked away. I had made my choice. But why didn't I feel relief? I went to the mirror in the hallway, the one I rarely looked at anymore. And when I saw my reflection, I barely recognized myself. My face was flushed, my eyes wide, my lips slightly parted like I had just run miles and didn't know where I was supposed to stop. I searched my own face for something: guilt, shame, peace, but I didn't know what I was supposed to find. I had come so close. Closer than I ever thought I would. And even though I had walked away, the weight of what almost happened pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. Because I knew the truth, just because I hadn't done anything wrong didn't mean I was innocent. I had wanted it. I had thought about it. Over and over again. And worse, a part of me still did. I heard the front door open. My husband was home. I swallowed hard, smoothing my hands over my dress as if I could erase the hours that had just passed. As if I could pretend I had just been another wife, out for a normal afternoon. He walked in, tired, distracted, just like always. But then, something shifted. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like forever. His eyes lingered on mine, searching, like he was trying to read something on my face. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't push. Instead, he sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "Listen, I meant what I said earlier. I know I haven't been the best." He hesitated, like he was struggling to find the right words. "I don't want us to be like this anymore." My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that this meant something. That this wasn't just another moment that would fade, that he wouldn't go back to work, go back to forgetting. But I couldn't shake the thought creeping in the back of my mind. Was it too late? I told myself this was what I had wanted. That this was the moment I had been waiting for. But all I could hear was my boss's voice in my head. "You deserve better than being ignored." And all I could feel was the warmth of his hand brushing against mine, the way his gaze had made me feel seen. I should have been thinking about my husband, about the life we had built, about everything we had been through. But instead, I was thinking about another man, about what could have happened, about what almost did. And I hated myself for it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling my husband's presence beside me. He was closer than he had been in months. His arm was draped over my waist, his breath warm against my shoulder. But I felt nothing. No warmth. No comfort. Just distance. And an ache I didn't know how to name. I told myself I had made the right choice. That I had done the right thing. But if that was true, why did it feel like something inside me had just died? Days passed, then weeks. My husband kept trying, small gestures at first, then bigger ones. Date nights. Conversations that actually lasted more than 5 minutes. A sudden interest in me. And I should have been happy. I should have felt grateful. But the more effort he put in, the more I felt the weight of the secret I carried. Because while my husband was trying to rebuild something, I was still haunted by the pieces of what I had almost destroyed. My boss didn't text me. He didn't call. He didn't acknowledge what had happened at all. And that should have made it easier. But it didn't. Instead, it made me wonder, what if I had said yes? What if I had taken his hand, let him lead me somewhere else, somewhere unknown? Would I have felt more alive? Would I have felt something again? I knew I should stop thinking about it. I knew I should focus on my husband, on my marriage. But late at night, when the house was dark and my husband's breathing was slow and even beside me, I found myself reliving that moment at the restaurant. The way he had leaned in. The way he had waited for my answer. The way I had almost given it to him. And that's when I realized something terrifying. Walking away hadn't ended anything. Because even though I had left that restaurant, a part of me had stayed behind. But then, something happened that changed everything again. They say temptation is a test of character, that walking away from it proves something about who you are. But no one ever talks about what happens after. About how the choice doesn't just disappear once it's made. About how it lingers, heavy and relentless, whispering in the quiet spaces of your mind. I thought that by leaving the restaurant, by choosing my husband, I had closed that chapter. But I was wrong, because the thoughts didn't stop. The what-ifs didn't go away. They only grew louder. Some nights, I would lie awake replaying every detail. The way his voice had wrapped around me like a promise. The way he had seen right through me, past the version of myself I had carefully constructed, straight to the woman I had forgotten existed. The way, for the first time in years, I had felt wanted. And that's what scared me the most. Not the fact that I had come close to making a mistake. Not even the guilt I carried every time I looked at my husband. No, what terrified me was the fact that a part of me still wanted it. I had convinced myself for so long that my unhappiness was because of my husband. That it was his neglect, his distance, his inability to love me the way I needed. But was that really it? Or was I looking for something that no one, not my husband, not even another man, could ever truly give me? Because if my happiness was dependent on being seen by someone else, then maybe the problem had never been him. Maybe it had been me all along. I started questioning everything. My marriage, my sense of self, the person I had become. I used to be someone who was confident in her choices, in her love, in what she wanted. But somewhere along the way, I had lost that. I had become someone who needed validation, who sought out attention in places it didn't belong. And I hated that version of myself. What did this say about me? About love? About the things we tell ourselves in order to survive a relationship that no longer feeds us. I wanted to believe that love was enough. That history, commitment, and shared years could outweigh loneliness, desire, and curiosity. But could it? Could love exist in a space where resentment had settled? Could it survive when one person had already started searching for something else? And if I had to convince myself that I had made the right choice, did that mean I had? I thought about telling my husband. About sitting him down and confessing everything. But what would that accomplish? Would it bring us closer? Or would it be the final crack that broke everything apart? Would it make him realize how far we had drifted, how much I had needed him? Or would it push him further away? I didn't have an answer. And maybe that was the worst part. The not knowing. The uncertainty of whether I was rebuilding something real or just convincing myself to stay because leaving felt impossible. The days passed, but the weight in my chest never lifted. My husband was really trying, and I should have been grateful. But every time he reached for my hand, every time he smiled at me across the dinner table, every time he kissed me goodnight, I felt like a fraud. Because while he was looking at me, I was still looking back. Back at a moment I had walked away from, back at a man I had left sitting in that restaurant, waiting for an answer I almost gave him. And that's when I realized, sometimes, the hardest thing isn't making the right choice. It's living with it. Have you ever felt invisible in a relationship? Have you ever sat across from the person you love and felt like they weren't really there? Like you could disappear and they wouldn't even notice? I used to think love was enough. That if you chose someone, if you built a life with them, that was all that mattered. That no matter what happened, no matter how hard things got, love would be the thing that held everything together. But now I'm not so sure. Because love isn't just about history. It's not about how many years you've spent together or how many anniversaries you've celebrated. Love is about being seen. It's about feeling like you matter. And when that starts to slip away, it changes you. It makes you question everything. I walked away from something that could have ruined me. Something that could have ruined my marriage. But even now, I wonder, did I really walk away? Or did I just choose a different kind of suffering? Because the thoughts are still there. The ache is still there. And I don't know how to make it stop. Would it have been easier if I had given in? If I had let myself fall into something reckless and dangerous just to feel alive again? Or would it have broken me in a way I could never repair? I don't have the answers. Maybe I never will. But I do know one thing: loneliness is a dangerous thing. It pushes you toward places you never thought you'd go. It makes you crave things you never thought you'd want. And if you're not careful, it can turn you into someone you don't even recognize. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever felt this kind of loneliness? The kind that wraps around you like a shadow, whispering things you don't want to hear. The kind that makes you wonder if you're really living or just existing. Let's talk in the comments. I want to hear your story. because I know I'm not the only one who's felt this way. And if this story spoke to you, if you've ever stood at a crossroads and wondered which path to take, then make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones we need to hear the most. Your story matters. And I'm listening.